an organization change and organization studies and consulting, etc., in strategy, let's not leave out strategy. We look at organizations, and those organizations have time as one of their elements, but they also have what I call three more T's. I call it the four T's. They have time. They purport to have truth in what they're doing. Even if it's a political truth, they purport to have a truth or an empirical truth or an accounting truth, however you want to look at it. They have technologies that are happening, be that product engineering or the digital technology, just the making of stuff, the warehousing of stuff. All of these technologies many technologies are in an organization, but if you think about Heidegger's essay on a question concerning technology, it was, what's the impact of these technological devices such as nuclear energy, etc. But now we're looking at what's happening to the world of nature and our impact of nature from organizational technologies. So that's big. So we got time, truth, technology, and the last one, since this is in Thinkman, and welcome, Duncan, we're taping. So is the idea of thinking. How does thinking happen in an organization? And so none of these four T's are singular or unitary. In other words, there's multiple kinds of times, multiple truths, multiple technologies, multiple kinds of thinking going on. So that's what I want to focus on in the questioning. We're just going to take it one by one, and I'm going to start at a very basic foundational level with the question. And Doug, you've heard this question before, and Anton, what is time in a corporation? And you can all talk now.
Hi, David. I have a question. This is your rubric that you're putting up, not Heidegger's.
You're muted, David.
I'm sorry. It's my rubric, but nobody else has put it together, and it's about Heidegger. Start with a basic question. In your way of working with organizations or a customer of organization, however that is, what's time? How are they treating time? Go ahead.
They treat it as a mechanism of control.
And productivity.
Mechanisms of control and productivity. What else when you think of time in an organization? Hi, Jillian. I didn't know you'd be coming, in our prayers for your mother.
And it's masked as quality assurance, but from my purview, it's really not quality assurance.
Okay. Can you say how that relates to time and quality assurance?
I teach as full faculty in the online environment asynchronously. And one of the things I've experienced is because the curriculum is canned, so to speak, there is no time in between terms for faculty to prep.
Got you.
In a 5-week format. And it ultimately impacts the quality of information that, as I was trained, peer-reviewed research.
Okay.
Because I'm constantly dealing with students not using internal learning material. And then when I research if this is peer-reviewed, it's not peer-reviewed. And we're also dealing with AI and its issues.
Yeah, thank you, Wanda.
There's a lacking of peer-reviewed material.
Well, you're getting at this relationship of time and the technologies of peer review and the technologies of a digital class environment. You're bringing in. We haven't got to truth or thinking, but we don't need to go there yet. We just need to stay on what is time. And so the time of Duncan Paley. So Duncan Paley is at the Fisk University. What is time at Fisk University or any institution?
Time is actually related to identity. I've always thought it's how we forge our identities themselves, right? People at Fisk define themselves in relation to the founding of this institution, I find, and the historical events around it and their distance.
Okay.
Like, so for example, whenever they talk about like some of the professors, some of them that have unfortunately been like, oh yeah, well that guy belonged to the Harlem Renaissance. That guy, this, you know what I mean? That's how it's defined. Oh, that was granddaughter of this person who was a Jubilee singer from 1870. It's always just in relation to this.
Okay, good answer. Thank you. And Doug, could I ask you, as an engineer, what is time in a corporation or company, medical, whatever it is that you're dealing with?
I think it's quite often viewed as a limitation.
All right. How so?
It's a hurdle to overcome to meet expectations of productivity.
Okay, very good. You passed the engineering test, so very good. And Dr. Anton, or if I can just say Anton in our setting here, what some of the things that you reflect on in time and organization change and development work that you do?
I think that when we look at time from a corporate perspective, not in the work that I do, but in the work that we mostly see in organizations, I put a little list in here, but time is material, money, utilitarian, very much physical and linear, which interferes with everything after that. Well, so I'll just leave interfering as the thing there, but it's also culture derived, right? If this is our organizational culture, and our organizational culture is get shit done, pardon my language, then that's the time, that's how we see time. So yeah, I'll leave more for other people.
Okay. And let's see, Paul Baines, when you go in for your medical treatments or when you go to the supermarket or you go to the bank, what kind of time are you encountering from these organizations?
I will talk about my prostate radiation treatment. That was the thing. Okay. And my recollection is getting foggy at the age of 80. I think I had a total of 30 sessions. And for me, going through that process, the time was it was the principle of organization.
Okay.
How many treatments are you going to get? At what strength and with other parameters? But they all were going to fit into some envelope, some cubby holes. And as I went through them, I was very conscious of the grid of days on the calendar as I was going through that process. They were my way of absorbing what was happening to me, because I could not tell, oh, you are bombarded my prostate with radiation. I can't feel that. There is no sensation. But what do my senses tell me? This is the day number 16 and Christmas is coming, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. For the hospital, the treating entity, the organization, the time for them meant we're going to have this guy for that long to do this procedure. Click.
Yeah.
That's my summary.
Well, that's a good summary. Let me say that's a very important answer, and all of the answers so far are very important, by the way. And I'm going to circle back to that because I want to unfold some aspects of time around what you said in your example and also all of the examples thus far. So I am keeping track here. Betty, you had something to say at the beginning. Did you want to add anything before I go to
Well, okay. I just wanted to quickly circle back to what Anton and Wanda said. They talked about time in terms, well, material, but also quality control because there is no time. So I would add the idea of an assembly chain approach. Our lives have become full of events that must be done in too short a time. And the material part, this happened to Paul when he had his radiation, is that you got to get it done. Got to get it done. Got to get it done. So I was inspired, both Wanda and Anton.
Thank you. You're opening up the whole abyss here and appreciate it. And let me turn to Ronnie. Ronnie, can you answer, what is time in entrepreneurship, if I can throw that one at you?
It's a way of describing horizons of meaning, going back to the integration of pasts and futures into what we call the now. You have time that extends into imagined pasts and imagined futures to create the potential for meaning, whether it's a work day, a quarterly earnings report, an annual review, so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you. So let's talk about consequences. So we know that there's multiple kinds of time in Sabine's answer about Heidegger. So we know that there's this multiple kinds of times without using any technical labels. We're talking about how, for example, in Paul's example, getting radiation affects kind of an assembly line, we're put in these boxes of calendar time and we have to hold our water while they do the radiation, et cetera, et cetera. So there's this way of time is happening. At the same time in a hospital, there's other kinds of time. A radiation center, it could have been a hospital or radiation center in a hospital, where, as Sabine was saying, care is a focus of time, that the existence of the patient and their quality of life and care, as they go through 30 radiations. I can speak from experience about the 28 radiations. So there's one kind of time kind of takes over care, and not in a good way. Just care is difficult to happen when you're on an assembly line, moving 30 radiation patients a day through each machine, and they're scheduled out by the second minute. Anyway, so, and then you were saying, Ushi was saying executive time, they want to find some free time, freedom of time is something that they're looking for. But I'm wondering in this question, what are the consequences of, let's call it the linear time of the assembly thing that we must do to get the work out? Get the work out, do the work on the customer or on the student or whatever it is. And what's happening to these other times, the time of a life, the time of care, the time of taking a bio break, the time of a family, or for our sweet dear Jillian, the time of grieving one's mother. What are these, grandmother. The times are kind of, sometimes are shoved to the side, sometimes are disallowed, sometimes have no time, because the main thrust of time, that trajectory of time. Does that make any sense as a question? So what are the consequences of corporate time on other kinds of time? That's the question.
A quick thing for me to say. They asked me during my treatment what kind of music I would like to listen to. That was Zorga for me. We are interested in your state of mind and your personal feeling of well-being. And we want you, while you're sitting here in this very tightly rigid controlled bombardment that is very precise, we want to have music playing for you to listen to, with the notion that that will calm you, that will soothe you, it will help you get through the time. And music is about time. And I don't want to reflect further on that, but I would say these are two kinds of time of which I was aware when I was going through the process. And there's other kinds of time too, but other people need to speak on.
Thank you, Paul. Good insight. Sabine, please.
But I think there are also these times, what you just mentioned, Paul, is still a very efficient use of time, right? It's not like somebody sat down with you and read you a poem or something. You know what I mean? I think it's still a caring, but it's also a rationed caring, right? And then there's that caring where you sit down, let's say with a friend who has a problem, right? And you take all the time that is needed, where you don't look at the clock. I mean, there are these times too that brought that to mind when you mentioned the music. Okay, it takes a minute to find the music for you. It is a degree of caring, but it is a far cry from saying, okay, I'm going to sit down with you. I'm going to listen to your concerns, and I don't care how much time it takes to help you.
Thank you very much. I'll just throw in a little bit. I only had 28 instead of 30 radiations, and I listened to Tom Petty music. They asked me, what kind of music do you want? But 1 out of 3 times they would forget the music, and I would just either know music or listen to some other kind of music. And in the first 20 sessions, I was just so afraid I was going to pee myself that I couldn't hear the music anyway. And I was holding this bar, clutched with my fist, veins popping out of my head, and they keep saying, do you want to stop? Mr. Boji, do you want to stop? I'm going, no, I think I can get through this. I think I can get through this. Because, but in the last 10, every once in a while, I would say, stop, we're going to start again. And the last 7 of the 10 sessions, they put a rubber balloon up my butt and blew it up with water so as to tilt the prostate away from the bladder. And so the radiation. Now, the good news is my PSAT scores are down to unmeasurable. So I'm really glad for the 2 kinds of time. That factory of radiation where they need to keep that machine working constantly, and they're going to put in the patient that's ready. And Paul, we used a newer technology where you had to hold your bladder with a half a gallon of water in it and not pee yourself. And for a guy with an enlarged bladder, it's not an easy thing. And So I went through all 28, didn't pee myself, but I did have to yell stop and head to the bathroom, come back to the table. And other times, anyway, so I want to get at something called that Heidegger talks about as a particular kind of time where, and I won't use the technical term till later, but it's a time where what matters is our existence, like the time of our life. And when I started the cancer treatments, I was told in Las Cruces I would have 3 years to live, that they might possibly be able to grab 10. But I went to Houston, Texas, and now they're saying 10 to 20, you know, and they were looking for a rise now since we're off the trial 2 medication. It was way more expensive than I could afford. It wasn't on the market anyway. Now the testosterone is starting to rise a little bit. And so anyway, it's looking like a future with maybe 20 years. You know what I'm saying? If I don't have a car accident or something else goes haywire. So I just want to call that time kind of the existence time, the time of my life existence that matters, right? And the other time, the time of the hospital technology or the supermarket technology, whatever organization you want to throw at me, that's about production and the optimal use of machinery. So you optimize that machine, or the 4 radiation machines at MD Anderson had to be optimized with their crews. But I don't want to just focus on hospitals. I'm talking about any kind of organization. If I'm in a university, I have a class schedule, like Wanda's talking about. So these classes, I have certain prep time, maybe not enough prep time. I've got a window of time, if it's synchronous, with students, and then to get their homework back to them and to meet the needs of the university, and then I, as a human being, don't really matter very much in that existence. Do you know what I'm saying? Unless there's a rare moment where, to give you an example of a rare moment, when I see a young lady in my class with bruises under her cheeks, their hair covered over some of it, and I'm pretty sure she's a battered girlfriend, So I don't just do my lecture. I stop, I take her out of the class, we walk over across campus to get her care. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So, but to do that, I have to stop the machine. Anyway, I hope that gives you some examples of what I mean by the time of one's existence versus the production time. Now, I am not saying, after hearing from Doug and Anton on Saturday, I am not saying that time doesn't count, the production time. I am thankful for the technology of cancer research and for radiation research. I'd much rather be radiated than cutting out organs, I am lucky in that regard, Go ahead.
David.
I wanted to get through radiation without gripping the thing. So the last 5 or so, even with the bubble up my ass, I just rested my hands on this piece of plastic that's shaped like an upside down V. And I would say, okay, I'm in control. I wouldn't go, I'm in control, but I'm relaxed. I can relax. I'm breathing. I'm trying to meditate. I'm listening to music. I'm trying, rather than being out of control. In other words, I brought control into my little space within the control. But it's very Desadian knowing that this is painful and stressful and humiliating. I mean, it's very humiliating I was 75. Now, for a 75-year-old man to have a 22-year-old woman looking up your butt, it's just not a great experience, even though they say they're a caring team of radiologists, you go like, this is not a situation I ever want to repeat in my life. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drag on, but I'm interested in this relationship of corporate time to the time of my existence. And I have about 20 years left, I figure. My bet on the future is I got about 20 to 25 years left. And I'll tell you something I mentioned to Anton and Doug. I don't really care that much about corporate time anymore. Institutional time can take a hike with their I got to get the shit done attitude, because what I care about now is, can I get up out of a chair without being in pain? Can I have a nice walk with my wife holding her hand? That time means, and grandchild time and time with you on a Thinkman Circle. It means so much more to me than, I don't know, standing in the line for a bank check or something weird. I don't know. Talk to me out there. Do you see these multiple times in relationship to the technologies? And then we're going to get to a big question in a minute, but let's have some more examples out there.
Yeah. David, I love your examples, but I'm also remembering that you have times when you're at work, in class, in which inspiration grows within the class discussion. Like I saw once you did shamanic drumming, it gave an experience to the people there that they had never imagined. In many of our cases, it's in class that we see needs that feed into our research. And so we don't plan it. It's not on the schedule, but it happens in spite of us. And the first day that I had a Muslim student explain Islamic banking to us, we were all with our mouths wide open. We always thought it was something evil. We didn't know what it was. But these moments, that's what makes the rest of it bearable, because you never know when the combination. It's when this Sartre thing about we're just there, but we have to make something of ourselves. And that's what you do constantly.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you. Anton, got your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Yeah. I mean, with your example in mind, I think when I think about corporate time, I see it as a forced time, right? Because it forces in a way, it forces how we are being and what we are doing, and maybe different from what we want to be and what we want to be doing. And I equate it to some degree to, so I'm a wounded warrior, right? And as a result, I have a service-connected disability where I'll have seizures every now and then. So I'll lose 5 minutes of my time. The time is still there. It's still happening. I have no idea what happened. I'm forced to be in a certain way. It takes away from the being and doing of the living that I want to be and to do. And I can't recover that because it's gone, right? And so I see it the same way. And while it's necessary for my brain to work through this electric activity to reset me to where I need to be, it's very much similar to in an organization. It's necessary for me to do certain things so I can continue to pay for my children to be in school and pay for the sustenance that we need as a family. And so while there's a necessity that, that there are consequences and interferences there, right? So, can we strike a balance? Right. And that's where that difference between the discontinuous, nonlinear transmaterial time of the technical term you're going to introduce in a minute versus the more linear material, physical time of corporate time.
May I add the bodily time of corporate time?
Yeah. Please repeat what you said, please.
Add the bodily time of corporate time, especially when we talk about bodily control.
Oh, absolutely. I didn't hear the word bodily. Thank you.
Yeah, because corporates want to tell you how long you can be sick, when you can have your bathroom breaks, how long you should take to eat, how long you should be able to, how long a task should take you in order for them to consider that you're actually viable to be doing that task. It tells you how long you should be able to take to walk from one location to another location, how long you should be able to take a bathroom break, all of those things. Even how long you should sleep, because
This reminds me of the way we take value and turn it into dollars and cents. We're taking the whole complex experience of many kinds of time and boiling it down to minutes and seconds. And it seems like that kind of abstraction, right? That reification of minutes and seconds, that reification of dollars and cents is meant to keep us from being able to address the real embodied experiences that we have.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Wanda, please.
Ronnie, I'm glad you used that term value. I was reading this past weekend articles that were peer-reviewed in the dietetics and nutrition field. I've been called back to reauthorize as a registered dietitian. And what was interesting is there were registered dietitians and dietetic technicians that were participants in a study, and in their use of artificial intelligence, and if they felt or thought that they were meeting the customer value and the customer needs in their practice. And the result was less than 3% of these professionals, to include psychotherapists, felt that they were less than 3% meeting the customer value and need and how they were using AI in their practices, which I thought was really, and this justifies why they are reauthorizing practitioners to return, to retrain them and how to do this.
Thank you, Wanda. We're deep into true time, and the key word here, a couple of key words, is the time of the sequence of nows in the linear horizon of time. So that's what we're calling corporate time, the production time, the get it done time, the time that takes precedence over the other times, although they want these situations of care to happen and be thrown in between. Then the second time, the existential time, existential authentic time, and is called primordial. And that's the time of existence of the planet, existence of my body in this world, the time from my being born. And now I have death on the horizon. When I was 15 or 20 or 25, I didn't have death on the horizon. But now, and I remember Sabine and I going through this section of Heidegger about death, and Sabine and I saying, this is really gloomy stuff. Why does he have it here? And now I think I know, after the bouts with cancer and radiation and hospital time, that when I get through radiation and start my recovery, my focus on time shifts completely. It just, now I'm out of the fear and stress time of radiation and the hospital schedule and flying to Houston and flying back and flying to Houston, flying back and all of that. But staying in Houston for a month and a half while they thieves siphoned out my savings account, bank account, and retirement, one of the retirement accounts of $30,000. I don't really care about that anymore. I don't care about the loss of $30,000. I care that my life has potentiality of being in this world with my loved ones and with you all. And that matters. Like, that's my 99% time is primordial. So it's not a term that we hear every day. You could call it existential time. Now, just before we shift into the next question, there is an authentic time and an inauthentic time, and both of those are happening in corporations. So when I'm sitting in a faculty meeting, for example, at a university, I call it inauthentic time because I don't give a shit about what they're saying or what they're doing, and I don't care about how many paper clips people are supposed to use and whether somebody's overusing the paper in the copy machine, or whether the dean wants to know why accounting teaches 4 sections and management are teaching 3, and why PhD faculty teach 2. And I just want to say, no. I not want to waste my lifetime on that. You know, my primordial time is wasted with you, sir. But if we now go to the next question, and I don't think we've answered the question of what is time either, okay? Because let me just say, for Kant, time was God's time and didn't happen on the earth. Neither did space. They were a priori, but they weren't there. Now, a lot of people disagreed with Kant, like Hegel. And Hegel said, well, I want to bring the spirit of that afterlife or other life into the world, but I'm not concerned about time. I'm concerned about spirit coming into history. So that time he was concerned with. Then you come along with Kierkegaard, who says, I don't really care about your doctrines of Christianity, much like Nietzsche, except Kierkegaard said, what I do care about is faith, that my faith matters even if I'm in a time of suffering on the radiation machine or the surgery machine, or I can't walk or whatever, all the examples you've mentioned in war stress. So yeah, that's another kind of time. And then Husserl came along. He was the teacher of Heidegger, and said, you know what? We're just going to bracket all that stuff about time and put it on the side. We're going to bracket all that stuff about space and time, and we're not going to deal with it. We're going to deal with consciousness, my consciousness of the now, my direct experience of the now, my experience of life in the now, and we're going to bracket all the rest of that stuff about existence. We're not, even life, we're not going to, it's just my conscious categories, and that's it. So you can see why Heidegger came along and said, dude, you've bracketed out the world. You've bracketed out existence. You've bracketed out primordial. You've bracketed out the nature and time, and you don't even have any spirit, dude. You know, you have washed out all of the important things about being in the world, including the world. You know, so this is why Heidegger's project is so darn important. Anyway, but now we're going to question what is truth. Is the next question. So we're going to switch gears so I can get to what is thinking, but we're still dealing with time, we're dealing with technology, but now we're going to bring in truth. And I'm talking about, let's start with corporate truth. The corporate truth is
We have two.
what? Yeah, I know. I'm just getting my question out there. So I see him, but I got a question to put to you, and I'm going to ask you, Usha, and then I'm going to ask you, Wanda, with your wonderful hands up, okay? Usha, I ask you one better, is there time at all? You know, does time exist? You know, or is Kant right? It's actually out of this world. But anyway, if you have no corporation, does corporation time exist? I'll leave that as an open question. Let me turn to Wanda. What is truth in an educational institution with an online program? What is truth?
Okay, well, truth in education and online program. I'm going to go back to authenticity of research that's peer reviewed.
The authentic truth that corporations define it. Let me turn to Duncan Paley, and what is your answer?
Say one last thing.
You can say one last thing, and then Duncan gets to say one last thing.
Absolutely. Has this caused a trend for universities to develop their own journals? Because I'm seeing that trend. Universities are like, we have our own journal now.
Maybe. I think universities have journals, though, and that still doesn't prevent people from plagiarizing and from peer reviewers and force peer reviewers to capture things. But I think that's a behavioral aspect, right? There's a human factors aspect there, people, and it's behavioral with regards to how we peer review and whether or not we plagiarize. There's a difference between peer review and evidence-based, right?
Right.
And then there's the question of what's evidence, right? But
right. And that's used a lot in the dietetic profession, evidence-based.
So we got truth of academic publication as evidence-based, as reputation of the university, as we better find our own journal because we can't get into these elite journals without $30,000 of publication. But Duncan, you've been very patient. Please go.
I think you already defined it, David, when you talked about Tomorrowland. Each room has its own truths, right? I think that's where it is, whether you're talking about the universities, whether you're talking about, a corporation, whether you're talking about individual journals. It doesn't mean that it's an absolute truth per se, but it's a truth that they define.
Let's stay with this, Duncan. Does truth exist in that room for the room of the people, or does it exist for each person in the room differently with their point of view? Does it exist out in some godly truth, some corporate CEO, even if they're not in the room, their truth in that room, or Mussolini in the case of Tomorrowland? But what is truth?
David, now you guys are this is Duncan actually. You guys are stepping on my territory here. Not only is it room bound, it's culture bound. There's a truth depending on what culture you've been educated in. And we're even to the point right now that we're looking at what happens when people who don't speak English have their world of, we don't call it truth, but that's what it is, their vision of things that will never be heard by the big journals because there is no English. And the journal of, it's AMR Research, the guy, Jay Barney, he told me one day, because I was getting angry about how non-English speakers were left out of the world conversation. He said, Betty, you get me a really good idea as to how those people can share with us without going through a translator, and I'll listen to you. Well, we didn't find the answer. We didn't. So Tomorrowland is a really good example of where we're bound to what we've seen in that room, and our truth will come from that room. Here, there.
Well, I'm gonna go back to Duncan, and Duncan, in that room, and thank you, Betty. And in that room, in the Tomorrowland, is there an uncovering of the truth by the people there as they travel from room to room, and then they have, let's say, a dinner, and they share what happened in the different rooms? Heidegger talks about a discoveredness, an uncovering, unconcealment of the truth, but also he talks about the freedom of truth. Without freedom, no truth. No truth is what he says. I don't know if you buy that, Duncan. I don't know. You're there on the rack with Desaad, and is it your truth is there with Desaad?
Watch me do a real mashup on this. Let's take Tomorrowland, Rousseau, and Solzhenitsyn and see if I can pull this off. When there was an anecdote from Gulag Archipelago that really stuck with me, and the anecdote was about this guy. It was a Colonel Kamenev. And this Colonel Kamenev was known in the village near the Gulag as this wonderful human being. He had a beautiful flower garden. He was known as a family man. He did something award-winning in like the local Philharmonic, if I recall correctly. But the moment he entered the Gulag, something inside of him snapped, and he became an absolute monster towards the prisoners. So you had the two sides of Colonel Kamenev. And to build on what Betty's saying, which I think also draws in Rousseau, it's perhaps, Rousseau talks about the social contract as binding us to chains. You may have different sets of chains in different rooms. Colonel Kamenev had one set of chains when he was tending his flower garden, but had a completely different set of chains the moment he entered the Gulag. Which is the true Colonel Kamenev? I don't know.
Okay. So you're in that room in Tomorrowland. You're in one of the rooms. It's Mussolini's mansion. You're there. It's in 1927, if I got the year right. And they hand you a passport, and you go room to room and travel with the actors. Now, there's authentic time and inauthentic time there, because there's kind of actors are doing something, but they're really wasting your time. They're pretending to care about the other actor in the room, like the chauffeur who's a spy for somebody. We don't know if he's a spy for Mussolini or one of Mussolini's sons that wants to dethrone Mussolini. We don't know. So there's, can I be authentic in a mansion with Mussolini spies? I'm going to say no. It's probably not very wise, to be authentic and truthful to power with Mussolini's spies in a room. You're probably going to be carried out in a body bag. So, and then there's spies that want to bring down Mussolini. So there's all this stuff in the background going on I never got to talk about in the Academy Management Journal article, but you got authentic time and inauthentic time, and you got truth that's very political, the Mussolini truth or the anti-Mussolini truth, or the truth of the maid who might just be a maid working in a mansion to pay for her family's food and education or something like that, So you have this, and then Tamara de Lambac is the really elegant painter portraits who's brought in to paint, I think his name's Gabriel or something like that, D'Annunzio, if I remember it right, who is the top military hero of Italy in the time that the black shirts are taking. And if Mussolini can keep him in sex, chocolates, and wine, then he doesn't have to worry about that hero becoming a competitor with his taking over Italy. You know what I'm saying? So the truth of each of those people, the hero, the Tamara de Lambaquita painter, who supposedly had a rendezvous before with the man she's painting, the military hero, and then the spies of Mussolini. This is all in the Tamara play, saying this is decadence at its most monstrous level, and its power, and the will to power, Nietzsche says, drives the will to truth, or the will to truth is driven by the will to power, to be more accurate. And if there's any truth going on in that Tomorrowland, it's more than the ability to interpret the room, you know what I'm saying, by an audience. Anyway, so we're getting at what is time in existential, primordial time, and then time of the nows. I'm in the now. Eckhart Tolle, I'm in the now. The now is the only reality that there is. I'm happy in the now. And I don't give a shit. It's in the Mussolini Mansion. I'm just in the now, drinking and having sex and eating my chocolates, you know? I'm in the now. I'm in the now. You hear that expression? I'm in the now. I'm meditating in the now. I'm just so wonderful. Hey, fuck you, you know? And then you got the production of those in a sequence. And that sequence of nows empties out life. It levels life into standard boxes or standard radiation treatments or whatever it is. And that is in this Dissadian chamber we call production in a corporation. And then, yeah, people are very excited to have their production, their technology and all that. I don't want to deride it too much, but I will, just to make a point, right, that what is time is not just perspectival, but people have power over the temporalizing of temporality. Like they have the ability in Frederick Taylor's time and motion studies to create the time and motions that the production workers will be under, or in the Hawthorne Bank experiment, whatever it is, and re-engineering, the process re-engineering of like almost $1 million spent at New Mexico State University on Deloitte Consulting to re-engineer the university by a bunch of ex-MBA students that are Deloitte consultants spending a week in spreadsheet land and then leaving us to implement it. Anyway, so there's this control over the temporalizing of time in an organization. Like they plan it, they engineer it, they assemble it into processes called socio-technical systems supported by accounting and finance, strategy time. So there's that kind of time. Then there's existence of time. And then when it comes to truth, do I really have the wherewithal to tell the truth to that power system? Or am I just kind of fudging my way through it, hoping that they will take a hint? Because there's that tension of the times. And when we talk about technologies, all these technologies are in, if you remember the Charlie Chaplin movie, Modern Times, and guy can have the lunch, and then the lunch is the machine is feeding him in the lunch, and then he's, it's this crazy image of technology. But, yeah, we want technology that'll save time, save money, make money. Now we get to thinking, just throw thinking in there. We have a thinking about time where we're colonized. Our heads are colonized in an organization thinking about time because we learn about time and motion. We learn about Gantt charts. We learn about program evaluation and review techniques of engineering time. And we're like time engineers in organization studies, right? And when our truth is whatever the CEO says is the truth. Because I park my brain at the door. That's what I learned to do. Park my brain at the door. If he says it's the truth or she says it's the truth and the board says it's the truth and we got to get it done in a quarter and we got to pump up the dividends, that's the truth, Of course, that's not the whole truth. You know what I'm saying? It's not the whole truth. But you can't handle the truth, as he said in that movie. Remember? You can't handle the truth, Can you really handle 30 rounds of radiation and to get in touch with your primordial, or handle a divorce, or handle Dr. Anton's example, right? Can you really handle that gaps of 5 minutes disappearing before you say, you know what? A life change in my thinking needs to take place here. And I'm not going to do the thinking of the now past, the now that's now, the now that's not yet, because those nows are leveled off. They're standardized. They're like countable units, which we need. We need countable units. Ask any accountant, any engineer. We need countable units. But since this is in Thinkment Circle, our thinking about truth, time, and technology shifts in the circle, So we want it to shift in the circle. You don't want to come into the circle with one kind of thinking about technology, time, and truth and go out of the circle thinking with a different. You want to go out thinking differently because that's the whole point of sharing, right? Is we would share what is time, what is technology, what is truth, and what is thinking. And those of you new here, we do meet every week to talk about and think, because that's the thinking about thinking. We're thinking of the ways of thinking that people and corporations are not thinking about, So that's a short definition. Okay, I won't rattle on, but we'll go to Sabine. And now I've introduced the 4 T's, truth, time, technology, and thinking. And we'll turn to Sabine, and that's about all my material.
Something that you just said brought that thought up, right? isn't that also true that with the corporate time, as you call it, that we are also pushing out thinking? That we're getting into this, okay, repetition, 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 right? Without really ever questioning it much. I mean, unless we are in a thinkment circle. But I think this routine of, I think that the mechanistic repetition of things, right? I mean, let's say I was, I'm doing something really mindless, like I'm sweeping the floor or something. This is, again, I'm thinking a task that, is not, I mean, you tune your thinking out, I mean, when I'm doing a mechanistic task, I start daydreaming, about the things that I will do when I'm already elsewhere, right? I'm like, okay, I'm envisioning, spending time with my husband and having a nice dinner, So I mean, I'm not really there with an unpleasant task. I'm not really there, right? And it ties back to what you were saying earlier, right? I mean, you're not concentrating on the machine that you're in a hospital setting, but I also think that in a rushed society that we are in, how much time do we actually take for thinking, for questioning, reevaluating? Do we actually do that?
No.
I mean, is it
I mean,
right?
that's the whole purpose. That's the whole purpose of strategy consulting and org development change and entrepreneurship, is to take time for thinking about inventions or the way we should go or the direction of the future, our bets on the future. But there's very little time, like for Wanda to do her lesson plans. There's less time. I mean, the whole time of the conference at Fisk University, Wanda's grading papers, because she had to cram that time into the conference time, like everybody else, So it's just, it's an important thing. There's 4 points here about this one, the disclosedness of care in a corporation or institution like a hospital or a university or a government. A change agent enters this realm of primordial care. They can be a re-engineer. I hate those people. Sorry, but they just make corporations evil places, downsizing the number of people, cutting the costs in half, and the remaining workers do the rest of the work. I don't think that's care. And we're thrown into this world. We've talked about that. I was thrown into the Vietnam War, and then Agent Orange happens in the things I eat, the things, what I breathe, the soil I'm walking on, my bedclothes, everything has got Agent Orange all over it. And I'm consumed by that physicality of Agent Orange. But I have bets on the future. My bet on the future in going to Vietnam is I'd have a chance at education. I didn't realize I was also going to catch Agent Orange. But I'm falling into being. I'm falling into inauthentic talk, like idle talk. I hear a lot of idle talk in corporations, a lot of idle talk. And it's like it got nothing to do with strategy or history or anything else, just fills this space. And what's true remains very hidden because the idle talk is covering it over. So not only is a lot of talk is covering over. So I just wanted to get you into this way of understanding those relationship of the 4 T's, I call it, and I hope it's been useful today. But let's hear from each of you and give some closing comments as we wrap it up here. Duncan Paley, you're unmuted, so why don't you start?
All I could think about is all the different times you were talking about during corporate time. It reinforced my belief that Desaad was onto something, because really the only truth is hedonism. If it feels good, as Desaad say, better do it.
Well, so did Nietzsche. So
You said that wonderfully. Yeah, thanks.
I think Paul's trying to get in here. I want to hear from each of you as we close out, if you could.
Very valuable for me is the 4 T's as a, when we started the framework of where we're at about time, thinking, truth, and technology, and trying to relate them and tie them together. That's a very fraught process for me. I really have to think in order to try and thread them together. I have found that very useful. And second thing for me to say is I find myself coming up with another label of time, and that is personal time. Whatever personal time is, I think, Betty, maybe you were talking about that. And personal time is my time. And I go back to music, and I'm sorry, I'll get lost here. I always go back to music, and whatever there is in any kind of songs that have to do with time, they're always very instructive. And Billy Joel says, I forget how the line goes, but he says, "Not on my time" is the line in the song. And it's about him jealously guarding his own self against the tentacles of the culture that is always telling him what to do, where to go, when to do it, how long to spend on doing it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we all feel free. We all feel free when nobody cares about what's the sand going through the hourglass out the window, the watch, take it off, throw it in the ocean. And I remember everybody at some point saying, the best thing you can do with this is to stand on and throw it into the water.
Thank you, Paul. Let's see who'd like to go next. Dr. Anton, sitting so patiently behind your name label there.
Yeah, I always use my university account, my Zoom account. But during the conference, Eddie and I talked about valuegenic or eugenic storytelling. And we were talking about, for those that were there, if you remember, intrinsic, extrinsic, and systemic value, and the hierarchy of value, so to speak. And I find that when we talk about primordial time, we're talking about intrinsic time, but that doesn't mean that there is no intrinsic value in corporate time or in corporate spaces. Because, for example, I find a lot of intrinsic time that I spend with my students. Otherwise, I wouldn't have left corporate or government work to do faculty work in what I do it in. And so I think that the challenge, to myself at least, is to find a way to convert more of the corporate time into intrinsic corporate time, right? Since, when we look at value, I think from the perspective of organizations, I think, there's work out there, obviously, that shows that people-centric is the way to go, is the right way to go. And so that's an intrinsic consideration. So if we can move towards making more of that corporate time our intrinsic time or primordial time, then it's a win-win, right? Yeah, that's my thinking right now.
Thank you, Anton.